Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me. In my series, Freemasonry and Satanism. So again, I think about the name and I think about all that I've learned since my research started in 2005. So what do I know about Freemasons now? Apparently, many of the lodges have built small-scale models of King Solomon's temple. And according to Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, they're seriously into teaching about these pagan gods, the many beings, even claiming Lucifer is their deity. But then again, like the joyofsatan.com, thejoyofsatan.com, they want people to believe that Satan, the devil, with the horns, is the good guy. 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, probably even 20 years ago, you would have never gotten away with this, trying to convince people that the devil's a good guy. But today, and you see the people out on the streets. Even had somebody soliciting in my neighborhood walk up the driveway, trying to sell solar panels, big nose ring in her nose. And the two characters before her in the last couple months, one was a tall guy, long hair, looked like a hippie, trying to sell solar panels. And I'm not trying to be judgmental. But here I am out in the country, and out of nowhere, somebody's walking up the driveway, and they just look kind of strange and suspicious. And to make it even more interesting, a month before that, a tall black guy in jeans is walking in the rural area up my driveway, says he wants to do a survey, and I say, "Who are you?" He doesn't have a card. So who knows what's going on? And the people believing in anti-Christian propaganda and all of that. It just seems like there's a lot of people leaning towards the left or progressiveness, anti-family values, more towards pansexual, transgender, gay marriage, all that stuff. But if you talk about this stuff, you're called a hater. And then I think about my series name, Freemasonry and Satanism. Well, that's self-explanatory. And the satanic symbols with the Freemasons, with the pyramids and the eyes, even the eye on the dollar bill. And who made the dollar bill? Most of the politicians are from the Masonic organizations. They created the dollar bill and the seal of America, the Great Seal. So Freemasonry, Satanism. And I find out that the Freemasons have a huge connection with the Zionist Jewish people who want to rebuild King Solomon's temple. And apparently they're doing it. They control the politics, the world, and they're vying for a global world order. A lot of the efforts and money is coming out of the United Nations. Ironically, it was the United Nations, UNESCO, the Education and Science Department, who put 1,000 archways, doorways to Baal, B-A-A-L, the devil, in our cities all over the world. The United Nations, the same people vying for a global world order. So you put in Zionism and the Illuminati, which is a higher level of the Masonic, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and the Kabbalists, the occult, sorcery, and many of these other organizations trying to show us how to ascend and communicate with spirit beings, spiritualism. What are we to think? So I thought I'd kind of deviate from the topics I've been on and talk about something a little bit out there, but it would enhance my perception, my knowledge about other religions. So I've made books on Max Long's books about the kahuna witch doctors, just to call it something you can understand, witch doctors, shamans in Hawaii, the kahunas, and Max Long's investigation. And a lot of it has to do with spiritual entities. Some of the witch doctors can capture disincarnate souls. That's a soul that doesn't go to heaven or Hades or wherever souls go when the human dies. A disembodied soul. And apparently they have some kind of technique. Maybe they have some kind of sacrifice where they actually kill the person and have some kind of rituals and incantations where they can capture the soul. Well, anyways, the witch doctors in Hawaii, the kahunas, can use their magic. I guess if somebody pays them, or they just happen to be a good person like the kahuna police, they can send these captured spirits to somebody and to possess them, and then that person develops something called a wasting disease. And they go to the hospital because they're just not getting better. And in Hawaii, the medical establishment and people like that are well aware of the signs of wasting disease and the popularity of the kahuna, shamans, witch doctors in that practice. Just like if you were in Haiti or Dominican Republic, you would be quite familiar with voodoo. So all around the world, even in Peru and Ecuador, taking drugs, going into another reality, an invisible reality that maybe is all around us right now. Spiritual entities. There goes that phone. When duty calls, you got to go to work. But I'm back. So like I was mentioning, religions of different people. The HUNA, a beginner's guide, Edna Hoffman, HUNA, a beginner's guide. Let me read the back of the book. A beginner's guide. Centuries ago, the kahuna, and ancient Hawaiian miracle workers, discovered the fundamental pattern of energy flow in the universe. Oh my. Their secrets of psychic and intra-psychic communication, refined and enriched by the modern scientific research, are now revealed in this practical readable book. Learn to talk directly to your own unconscious selves and others. It could change your life. So talk to your unconscious selves or others, other people's consciousness, other people's subconsciousness, spiritual beings of people who have died, maybe spiritual entities that were never born in human bodies. So I've been reading this, and in my pursuit to figure out WTH and what is behind the intentional efforts to destroy Christianity and the Islamic people's religion, and who are all these prophets and seers and psychics and channelers? Who are they talking to? Where is this information coming from? Why was the Hitler regime into the Vril Society? Stool Society? What's with the Jewish people into the Kabbalah? Many Kabbalists throughout the history, thousands of years, were accused of sorcery, burned at the stake. Oh my, what are we dealing with? Does any of this have anything to do with our world? So a brief explanation could be in order, because I've already read about this stuff in the past. I made some videos on Max Long's books, Max Long, and I'll be looking at his books again. Quite interesting. Apparently, this person you see sitting here, me, is my conscious self. Yep, you agree? Simple enough. When I go to sleep and I'm completely oblivious to the world, and I'm dreaming those bizarre dreams we get sometimes, that appears to be my subconscious self. Or maybe not. So the me here is the conscious self. But they call it a lower self. It is another self, another entity, if that helps you to understand, that can't speak, but actually controls this conscious self, the lower self. So there's actually two of me sitting here, my conscious self and my lower self. My conscious self can see and talk. My lower self doesn't see, or it does, I don't know, through these eyes or speak through this mouth, but apparently it has a greater awareness of what I'm doing more than I do. So if you ever get those things that make you knee-jerk or duck your head when you're walking onto something where you might hit it, your subconscious self is actually the controller of your conscious self. The way I thought about it, it's like having a computer that's you're using. You can watch the screen, but in the background you have the security software, antivirus software, looking out for you while you're typing away or watching a video. So that would be the difference between the conscious activity of the computer watching the video, or the antivirus paying attention to what comes over the internet connection. So that would be the conscious self and the subconscious self. Now there's a third self, the higher self. So apparently the way the Kahunas teach, and a lot of other New Age teachings, there's a higher spiritual self. There's a conscious self, me right here. There's a subconscious self paying attention to what I'm saying. And if it sees danger, and maybe it even can see into the future or whatever, a greater awareness. It alerts me, and if you're doing something it doesn't approve of, it attacks you. It even contains programs. I don't know if you ever read Dianetics, but apparently as a young child, from baby to 10 years old, your subconscious self is seriously programmable. It gets into routines, and they get stuck, and that person has a routine, and to change the routine, you have to actually go into the lower self and recreate the habits again and again and again and again, and then the lower self will get it. So apparently, if you want to communicate with your lower self, which most people ignore, you have to recognize it's there. But according to this book, it's helpful if you give it a name and try to treat it with respect and realize the job that it's doing. So in my case, I thought about it. I'm Rick. People who know me watching the videos. My middle name is Joseph. So I said, well, I'll just call my lower self Joseph. And apparently, if you talk to your lower self, it can actually comprehend the commands and do things for you. And then I thought to myself, well, what would I call my higher self? Well, I called it another long name like Richard. And so when I'm speaking to my higher self, that's Richard. And the lower self would be Joseph. And here's Rick. It's what it says in the book. I studied more psychic research and dowsing for a couple years before I kind of fell into the pursuit of a new world order, globalism, and all that craziness I talk about, and the information about Jewish people and Zionism, and who we even thought about Satanism and demons and Lucifer. That was outside the box for me. So I started looking into it, and here we are today, the May 29th, 2019, and a lot of things are going on in the world. So let me just show you. Knowing that they now have super fast computers and wireless technologies and 5G microwave transmissions coming online, and they've been doing a lot of research on how to maybe program the lower self. Knowing that the lower self gets programmed and controls your conscious self. Mind control. Now, so they can control the lower self possibly with repetition and things they teach, and preferably to gain much more control over the lower self, not the conscious self, me talking right here, but my subconscious. From 0 to 10 years old is highly susceptible to programs. That's why the communists, in my opinion, had to take over the education system. So that's what they did, is they were programming the lower self. The conscious self obeys, and the lower self sort of controls. The conscious self thinks it's in control. But then again, historically, many people have had communication with a higher self, even like Nikola Tesla saying, I'm not the genius that you think I am. I've been having visions and dreams and hearing things and seeing entities appear before me. People have said that's happening. They're communicating with their higher self, the spirit world. So you got your higher self communication, your conscious communication, and your subconscious communication. Now the powers that be, like I just repeated, have been studying this stuff for the past 100 years quite intensely. The Hitler regime and those scientists that were brought to America after World War II, Project Paperclip, Project Montauk, MK Ultra, and all this stuff is to probably program the lower self, and then of course the higher self, your conscious self, will believe it. So they understand how to control the brain with the microwaves, wireless systems, communication systems. So it might behoove us to pay attention to some of the historic information from the shamas and ancient religions to try to figure out where we might be today. So the Satanists appear to be in control of our planet. They know about how the mind works. They've hooked up electronic equipment and actually are able to read the mind and program the mind to hear things. The evidence is quite clear. Go on Yahoo image site, put in mind control, look at these pictures, look at the websites. Think about the 5G transmissions, microwave towers, wireless systems, cell phones, iPads, TVs. Everything is connected to our mind. So with electronics, they can get samples of the radiations coming from your mind. They can put that into a computer and bounce that same information back at you, and you'll think it's you thinking. News, TV programming, talk shows, magazines, billboards, social environment. They got us. It might behoove us to wake up. The greatest weapon of all is not nuclear weapons. It's information control. So ties in with the artificial intelligence software being run everywhere, where when you're typing, your computer corrects you, or you're talking about or looking up to buy a lawnmower, and then you start getting all these commercials or advertisements for a lawnmower. They're closing in on us with total control coming available. Mind control. They use sex, girls, obvious mind control. Your subconscious reacts to that. Your conscious mind reacts to that. The CIA, I've gone over books. They're highly into this stuff. Clearance A1 required to access the top secret documentation. A3 to B6 clearance required for all other access. Unauthorized access prohibited. Use of deadly force to protect the national interest is authorized. Deadly force. And people into yoga, meditation, all this research, all this New Age propaganda, all this social conditioning. Christians are haters. They created the religion of Christianity just to control people. People believe it because they've been mind controlled. And also, when you think about it, just like when you dial your radio on 95 FM, or you go up to 109 FM, or down to 88.1 FM, it's different frequencies. Your mind has a left lobe and a right lobe, a left brain and a right brain. The left brain operates on this conscience frequency. It's me looking at myself in the camera talking. The right brain operates on a subliminal, higher frequency. And apparently the right brain, in between the two lobes, is the pineal gland, something like a little tiny pine cone. And they started putting fluoride in the water about 100 years ago. And it calcifies the pineal gland, so you can't communicate with your higher self or the higher spiritual world or others. They blocked your radio in your brain, calcifying the pineal gland. And apparently, there's other research I've done, but there's an invisible cord at the top of my head connecting me to the sky, some kind of invisible direct link microwave beam, if you want to think of it that way, or a laser beam. It's kind of an elastic thing. And if you sever the cord, they call it the silver cord, you can go look it up, the human being will plop over and die. Did you know that? Is that true? Look at this picture with the guy with his head on fire, in prayer, communicating with the higher world. Prozac, drugs they're using. So the puppet masters are controlling our world. Is there any doubt about that? And the left-right brain, you can go look this stuff up. So I guess the point is pretty simple. They can make people believe anything they want to. 911, threats of a nuclear missile coming in. Iran people are evil. We have to attack them and destroy their country. The Venezuelan government is evil. The Russians are evil. The Mexicans are evil. Let's put up a fence. All of it's mind control. And it's under serious manipulation and control, the powers that be. They don't want to lose their grip on our world. I've been reading this book. So I'll read from it now. And then I got some pictures in here that I printed out regarding the HUNA, kahunas, this HUNA religion. It's just another expansion of our minds to try to figure out WTH, what the heck is going on? So where I mentioned earlier that my lower self, according to this book, if you can create some kind of familiarity with it, you can gain a greater conscious awareness of your reality. So they said most people ignore it, don't even know they have a lower self. And it's like a background computer program looking out for you, even controlling your biological body. And if you get sick or hurt or some outside force is going to attack you, your subconscious mind can alert you. And we've all had those deja vu moments where we thought of something or we did something we didn't know why we did it, and we're glad we did it, saved our lives or whatever. So the subconscious self, I named it Joseph, Rick, and this higher self could be called Richard. And I know that the fluoride in the water can calcify the pineal gland. They can sever my disable my radio transmitter. And the pineal gland is full of water and little tiny crystals, like a radio. But the fluoride in the water calcifies it. It's like ripping the antenna off of a radio. It's only going to get static. They don't want us connected. So it seems. So anyways, the reason I mentioned the lower self being called Joseph, in this chapter in this book is HUNA, however you want to say that word. HUNA. That'll be fun saying that again and again. HUNA is your inner self, the child within, or the low self. Most any label can be used. Choose the one that will fit your idea of your own HUNA best. You will find your concept of that self will vary according to circumstances. So remain flexible for a while. Think of each label as role-playing, one that is used under very special circumstances. The first thing to do is to choose a name for your HUNA. HUNA. Is that a Hawaiian word? It is not polite to keep saying, hey you. So apparently your subconscious self has an awareness. It's like a guardian angel, always with you. It can't talk. It can't do the things, pick up a rock or swing a baseball bat. But it's looking out for you 24/7. A lower self. So a specific name will clarify to whom you are actually talking. Be sure the name you choose is compatible with dignity, pride, and self-worth. These are the characteristics which will encourage in our low selves. You might name it after some person whose character you admire or who typifies success in your chosen field of endeavor. So isn't that interesting? I chose my middle name, Joseph. The name can be whatever pops into your awareness from your low self. So I guess my low self wanted to be called Joseph, if it popped into my mind. The name you choose may be a temporary one, usable until a more suitable name can be determined. Now remember, I'm not trying to teach New Age. I'm looking into books that New Agers read. If I weren't doing this research, I wouldn't have gone searching for this stuff. I was quite content being the guy who lived near the beach with a huge sailboat and a house with a swimming pool and living my life. But I became aware, I paid attention, that there were things going on in the world that were wrong, and I set myself out to go try to figure out WTH, what the heck. Some people do that. Some people just choose to continue to ignore it. And if you go into the parking lot of the shopping center tomorrow, and you look up and you see that the planes are dumping tons of chemicals, and you try to see some passerby who just got out of his car or who is coming out of the store with a cart full of groceries, and you say, hey, look at that. They will actually put their head down, look at the ground, try to ignore you. If you push it, they'll get angry, leave me alone. Their lower self is in control. Just like people who are Democrats. There goes that phone. So as I left off, just like people who are Democrats and have these days, this hatred of Republicans, and people who are Republicans who have this disdain and dislike for Democrats, their lower self is programmed. And it controls the conscious self. And you can't just change that program with any amount of logic. And when the communists, during and after World War I, had infiltrated the United States and took over the education institutions, religious institutions, economic institutions, the legal institutions, political institutions, they have slowly reprogrammed our lower selves, our basic subconscious programming. People are fervently believe these days that Christianity needs to be eliminated, or that the Arabs, even some people will believe, still did 9/11, or that the Germans are actually evil, or maybe Iran is actually evil, or the Russians are evil, or the Chinese are evil, or the Venezuelans are evil, or the Mexicans are evil. On and on and on. The Vietnamese, the Koreans, nuking Japan, the Japanese. Where does it end? What evil forces would bring this about? It's something certainly way up here. And I guess that's figuratively. It's some kind of cosmic energy. And they even have a word for it, polarity. Let's say Christianity, Jesus Christ, and God is a positive polarity. And that Satanism, Lucifer, demons, and evil people are negative polarity. It's a measurable thing. So people, if they're programmed with a negative polarity, they know not what they do. Loan sharks, thieves, murderers, hitman. Think about it, a hitman, he gets paid to go kill people. He doesn't run around every day thinking, I'm evil. His subconscious self wouldn't allow him to do that. He justifies it. He says they deserved it. Back to the book. Just a funny thing you can be talking about when you study the HUNA religion, and some of the stuff in this book is going to support the things I'm saying. So calling your lower self a name so that you can become familiar and communicate with your subconscious. Do this until you feel completely comfortable with the name you have chosen. Inform yourself that for now you will be addressing it by that name. Later you may want to change it. And again, I'm not trying to teach anybody to do this. I just think it's worth a conversation to understand the mechanics and physics of ourselves. And a lot of this is self-evident even in Christianity, where people go to church and they pray and there are 10 commandments. The 10 commandments are there to guide a person into the positive polarity. The Antichrist, Satanic, Sabbatai, Zivai, Kabbalistic, Aleister Crowley teachings, commandments if you will, is a negative polarity. And people who say, we're a dual creation, society, duality. But just keep it in mind. And keep in mind that the governments of the world have been studying how to control we humans for a long time. And they've been using it. They're microchipping people and mesmerization techniques with TV programming and infiltrated the schools, even in California. They're teaching first graders, 6-year-olds, second and third graders, explicit sex. Again, think about the age group, 0 to 10. And they're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're teaching them about explicit sex. So they are actually programming the subconscious about sex. So when they're 11 or 12 or 13, they're aware and knowledgeable, and maybe these evil elites expect the multitudes of the young people who get taught this way to be easier people to have sex with. It's all the mechanics of the operations of the human body. We are more than we think we are. All right, page 44, moving on. Max Long called his low self George. I call mine Junior. One student named hers Subby, subconscious. after the word subconscious. Another student, Mary, named hers Mary Jane. Choose whatever seems suitable. All kinds of ideas will occur to you. In some primitive religions, it is believed that each person has a secret true or real name. It is also believed that a magician cannot effectively practice magic on a person unless he knows the true name. So now we're talking about the Kabbalah and magicians and communicating with spiritual entities in the book on the Hawaiian HUNA religion. You see the connection? So it's worth reading this. Of course, true names were closely guarded secrets. There is a protective value in this practice. If your low self learns to accept values and ideas only when it is addressed by name, you can control what affects it. Naming your own low self is the first step. Learning about its nature comes next. So if your subconscious is actually some kind of other entity trying to control you, and this book is teaching you how to become, have some awareness and acceptance and friendship with it, again, I read this stuff, but it doesn't mean I have to absolutely believe that's the way it is. But they are suggesting becoming more familiar and communicate with your low self by naming it. Then, armed with some knowledge, begin a series of communications with it to find out more and more. Each technique practice will reveal another facet of your low self and help integrate its personality with your own. So apparently it's saying that your low self, your subconscious self, actually has a personality, and you want to integrate this personality with your own. Oh my. The mind of HUNA hippie, probably saying that wrong, has been called a biocomputer, for it has many of the characteristics of a computer. And again, even me on the computer, I'm noticing more and more every day that computer is interacting with me in ways I don't intend, suggesting things to me, correcting things for me. It's kind of spooky. Its exact literal deductions about time and space are one of the characteristics. Another is the aspect of being literal and factual in its interpretation of everything fed into it. The low self is different from a computer in that it converts speech into images, which it holds in its memory bank. So if you've studied Diagnetics and other teachings, you know that traumatic things that have happened to us as children seem to get blocked or programmed into our minds and cause certain kinds of defects. Maybe some people are afraid of heights, or some people can't eat dairy products, or some people are shy, some people are very aggressive. We get programmed at a young age. All sounds, sights, smells, and taste are images recorded into its consciousness. It cannot differentiate between the messages it gets from the environment and those from your thoughts, ideas, and feelings. It registers them all as facts of life, organizing them into a fantastic web of relationships. It associates each input with others already there and classifies the input. The word carrot is associated with its form, color, taste, and smell. Different words are associated with other words in some relationship within the mind of the HUNA hippie, the subconscious. And the word association tests given by psychologists can be used by HUNA students at home to find out what sort of relationships are for you personally. Yuhain is the dualistic self. So now they have another part of us, Yuhain, separating what is thought and what is felt. Living in a world of dualistic concepts of right and wrong, bad and good. So I think the HUNA would be our conscious self living in a world with concepts of bad and good, whereas the hippie, the lower subconscious self, doesn't have a morality characteristics like that. It can be taught, I believe. Hippie puts it all together into patterns. Most of us do more thinking than feeling in our daily life. Some of us are unaware that feeling is a continuous stream of consciousness for HUNA, our conscious self. Many of us are unaware of what we are feeling. But the two-way streams of thought and feelings are flowing and registering in the mind of hippie to be translated into action, memory, and storage. So without a doubt, there are memory banks in our body, computer, wherever that may be, probably the brain. Different theories on that. And hypnotists can hypnotize people and regress them and access those memories. And they do that a lot for therapy with people with particular bad habits or problems, and it stems back to some traumatic event when they were a young child, when and where we are most susceptible to the programming of the subconscious mind. And when I say this and all this kind of discussion, and I relate it to Freemasonry and Satanism, and the pursuit of globalism, and the intentional destruction of Christianity, family values, and the introduction of transgender, pansexual, sex with anything, and the concept that there is no morality, there is no right and wrong, versus the concept of morality, right and wrong, this information becomes necessary if anybody seriously wants to contemplate reality and find out WTH, what's going on in our world. With the help of our low self, we can recover many past experiences of feelings of which we were not aware. These memories still have an impact on us, though they have been long forgotten by HUNA, our conscious self. So if I ask somebody watching this video, what was your nickname when you were 6 years old? You probably forgot. But if a hypnotist hypnotized a person and said, go back to when you were 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 6, and then they start talking, what is your nickname? And they'll actually sound the voice of that 6-year-old. Oh, my nickname is Titi, Tammy, Bobby. And I've seen this to happen. It's in the Dianetics also. Another important fact about hippie is that it keeps a record of all our conditioning, all the prohibitions we have accepted, all of the outer world's restrictions on our behavior, all the taboos, all the no-nos, and the other types of input, which are what we are unconsciously live by after we are grown up. So when you program the subconscious as a Christian, then you're a Christian. As an Islamic, you're Islamic. You've been programmed for your subconscious. Hindu, Buddhist, try to convert somebody and convince them what they're programmed to be is not true. And you'll have a person turning to anger and rage. And the powers that be that run our world are aware of this. Let something drop on me. And they know how to trigger people with these kinds of attacks on people's subconsciousness. FYI. All the defenses we build into our computers are available to us from hippie, or subconscious. The record is clear and exact. Our self-image, which developed from other reactions to our behavior, is there intact and measurable. It's there whether we feel lovable and worthy, or whether we feel unlovable and unworthy of receiving attention, or whether we feel in control of our own life or controlled by outside forces. The difficult task of HUNA is not in getting answers, but in learning to ask the questions that have answers. We may have to ask many questions before we hit on the one that has an answer. We may have to learn new ways of asking questions in order to receive information. HUNA has a literal mind and an exact mind. So how we are programmed is how we are going to behave to situations. That's why the communists said they were going to infiltrate all aspects of our society during the communist hearings after World War I. The world was fighting communism then, and it seems communists control the world now. And they've worked behind the scenes, a lot of murders and bribery, stuff like that. And to gain the control of the people, they have to use a lot of mind control. So they have to know these things. The mind that deals in tangibles, images, and real memories, whether they come from experience, thought, or feelings, questions must be phrased in literal terms because the answers will be literal. Ambiguous questions cannot be understood by our low self. Any response to an ambiguous question will be incorrect. The art of asking questions to HUNA must be developed. Your low self is only too eager to help you become better acquainted. It may even be over-eager to please you, your subconscious. Guard against seeking answers to what you have already decided you want to hear. You have to hold your own desires and opinions in abeyance, not thinking about the answer, just the question, and being open to whatever comes. You will, in the beginning, have to convince HUNA, your subconscious, of your sincerity, your earnest desire to hear the truth as HUNA sees it, not as you wish it to be. So apparently you'd have a conflicting situation. You have premeditated thoughts about things, and apparently your subconscious has premeditated thoughts about some things, and they may not be the same. When first becoming acquainted with your low self, you will find that it is like getting to know a stranger. HUNA may hedge a little. It will not be sure of your response to its revelations. Here is where you must play the role of a very wise parent. Being patient, understanding, and loving, tell your low self that you realize you have not listened to it in the past, and that you are sorry. Admit that you have called it names, degraded it, acted with hatred and disgust towards it. Convince your own self that from now on, you, next page, will mend your ways and will treat it kindly. Always speak of it in a positive, loving way and will care for it, nurture it, and protect it as you would your own child. And you must keep your word. Many of you will find that early life experience taught HUNA not to trust anyone. Remember your parents telling you, don't talk to strangers. You're programming the subconscious. Those who were supposed to love and care for it may have failed to do so. Expecting love and encouragement, some HUNA found rejection and put-downs. So if you were shamed or put down as a child, you had built in some defense mechanisms into your subconscious. You must convince your own inner self that you will behave differently if this is what has happened. It may take a little time for your HUNA to learn to trust you. And remember, if you're going to learn about this or practice like they do, you give your subconscious a name that you trust. I'm not opposed to learning more about myself. I know that I am more than I think I am. I believe I'm a spiritual being. I believe there's plenty of evidence of out-of-body experiences or after-death experiences. And I believe what the Bible teaches and Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead and casting out demons and unclean spirits from people, bringing them back to health, and all of those other qualities from the Mexican shamans, Peruvian shamans, Ecuadorian shamans, and Hopi Indians and native indigenous tribes all over the planet. There is something to the older historic religions. You must convince your own inner self that you will behave differently if this is what had happened. It may take a little time for your HUNA hippie to learn to trust you. But if you follow the HUNA precepts of loving yourself first, putting it before all others in importance, defending it from others, and never rejecting or insulting it, you will find it naturally trusting by nature emerging. You will find its naturally trusting nature emerging. So you have to put your loving yourself before others. Not so sure about that. Jesus taught we are to love one another. Treat others how you want to be treated. Communication will become free and honest. Before you could reason or talk, HUNA hippie was dealing with the outer environment as best it could. It was forced to adopt certain behaviors and attitudes in order to survive. These behaviors and attitudes remain as the background of your life. Most of us cannot remember that period of time before we started to reason or think, before we verbally communicated with our world. But with HUNA techniques, and by gaining the confidence of your HUNA hippie eye, however you say it, you got the point right now what they're talking about, the subconscious self. Those experiences can come into your awareness to be dealt with in a reasonable manner. And apparently with MK Ultra and Project Montauk and many other black projects by the governments, they're programming people who don't know that they're programmed, and they're triggerable. And apparently the way they do it is they put people under an extreme traumatic situations, maybe even in a cell with no windows and no sound or anything, and they completely shut off their minds. And then maybe they're playing recordings and they start to program people. And they say they're out there and they can use them to kill people, assassins or whatever. Triggerable. So it does pay to try to understand this stuff. Alright, continuing on. I started the video yesterday on the Hawaiian religion HUNA. A beginner's guide. So continuing on here, page 46. When your body was in an infant state, before you had any power to care for yourself, it was fully dependent on others for a sense of worth, validation of its lovability, and its ability to control others by behavior. It learned through experience to feel differing degrees of lovability, worth, and power. Infants who received full caring and loving attention moved outward into the world confident and self-assured. They trusted the outer world to be a nurturing, a place as home was in their early years. The capacity to develop trusting relationships was encouraged in the secure atmosphere of the home. Early frustration of human needs sets a pattern in HUNA hippie, and I'm saying it wrong, I apologize, the subconscious, of limited ability to trust other people. You can begin to remove those limits on your low self by being trustworthy. You can love your own self, hold it in high esteem, and give it a sense of own worth and power. Some of us, though forgotten early experiences, through forgotten early experiences, turn to the wrong people for satisfactions of our needs. Or we are unreasonable in our demands on others. We insist that they love us and pay attention to us. These unreasonable demands usually lead to our being rejected. That fulfills an inner belief in which we say the world is a rejecting, unforgiving place to live in. So I suppose our experiences can affect how we believe. You get a more loving, secure, comfortable environment when you're young, it's probably going to be beneficial versus drug addict parents or unemployed parents or all kinds of suffering and screaming and hollering going on because of social conditions and difficulties, well, you're going to have all that programming in your body, your lower self. In this culture where we are taught to consider others' welfare before our own, a personality is created that inhibits personal desires in order to please others. To win their acceptance and love is our most important task. To win their acceptance and love is our most important task. We become quite disillusioned to find it cannot be done. You just can't please everybody. When decoding the Hawaiian language for information about the HUNA hippie, Max Long found that the low self had a tendency to hide. It is mute, it does not speak. It stays within, and in some cases uses its control over the metabolism to add layers of flesh on the physical body to feel more hidden away. It retreats from expression and will escape your probing mind to hide even from you. It is skilled at hiding. This characteristic sometimes tends to make attempts to know it difficult. Perhaps it has been hiding from you for years. You may have to move slowly and delicately to get it to reveal the opinions, beliefs, and emotions it holds. The ease and difficulty of communication may depend on the depth of which your low self has been hiding. To see low selves before they hide, you must turn to watching infants and children in their uninhibited and unrestrained behavior. You can learn about your own inner self through scientific research into the behavior and tendencies of small children. In one experiment, it was determined that each baby had a built-in response to another human being in distress. That response is the desire to alleviate distress. Even small infants demonstrated this by turning toward an adult and appealing to them to act. The low self will do the same. So your low self acts like an infant child. The HUNA hippie is very sensitive to pain. The HUNA hippie dislikes to see any live creatures suffer. The low self dislikes perceiving another's pain almost as much as it hates to experience pain itself. Because it is a part of the world of nature, another pain is felt as its own. This has caused the HUNA hippie to retreat and hide from the world that inflicts pain. The elemental consciousness of the low self-mind is like a mirror. It reflects back whatever is put into it. It does not judge, reason, or value. It accepts all values, judgments, thoughts, and ideas that come to it. It organizes all of its encounters and holds in its memory everything that either is or HUNA has experienced or perceived. And of course, HUNA would be your conscious self. It is a servant to the HUNA, your subconscious. It is a student of the HUNA, so apparently you can teach it. And obeys HUNA as the middle self's obedient child. Conditioning children is like conditioning the low self. Giving it a framework in which it feels it can survive is best. Your low self is in charge of physical, mental, and emotional, social, and personal survival. In case of extreme physical danger, it can even take action. It has no morals of its own, but adopts the morals of those it associates with. It builds a moralistic framework from the material given to it. However, you can condition the low self. What is conditioning? Conditioning is the process by which the low self learns to function in this world. Through conditioning, the low self acquires its sense of right and wrong and learns modes of behavior that enable it to maintain the equilibrium that is essential to its nature. The capacity to accept conditioning is one of the low self's great talents. That is how it learns physical skills such as walking, driving, bicycle riding, skiing. A skill is a habit, although we don't think of it as such. Skills and habits are learned by repetition. In order to become competent, we must practice a physical skill over and over. A routine becomes a habit through much repetition. We have habits that we consider good and others we consider bad. We have habits that we consider good and bad. Whether they are good or bad to the low self depends on what it has learned by conditioning. The low self can also be conditioned by authority. Sometimes an authority figure has to speak only once to engrave a commandment indelibly onto the low self. Got a firefly flying next to me. Authorities who have the power to give or withhold what the low self wants, needs, and desires are gods to the low self. Insofar as the authority has this kind of power over the low self, the authority is able to condition it. So the low self is conditioned by experience and by the voice of authority. With siblings, starting at birth, parents are the gods. Later, through repeated experience with siblings and playmates, fixed attitudes are formed. Then Mary takes her little lamb into the education system. Although this little lamb would rather frolic and play, it is taken in hand and indoctrinated into society's standards of behavior, of what is true and false. This is simplified, of course, but my purpose here is to indicate what we are looking for when we communicate with our low selves. Many fixed beliefs that originate in childhood are still retained by our low selves. Some of these beliefs are still useful, some are not. You may think you are well aware of all the beliefs you hold, but I have found neither I nor my students were aware of them until we began to probe our low selves systematically. And so far, some of this might just be a little boring, but it does get to some very interesting material. I would like to tell you about a childhood experience that illustrates what conditioning can do. When I was about 9 years old, the family living in the next house was composed of a father, a mother, and 2 daughters. My age, 1 younger. These 2 girls missed school often because of colds. This puzzled me because colds were rare among my family. What puzzled me most was that the girl's mother took such care to prevent colds, but my mother didn't. I frequently heard the girl's mother say, "Put on your rubbers or you'll get wet feet and then you'll come down with a cold. Bundle up well, and if you get chilled, you'll be in bed with another cold." Oh dear, it looks like you're catching another cold. So the authoritative figure, the mother, telling this to the children, is actually programming that in their subconscious self that they're susceptible and get colds, and the low conscious self is obeying, giving the child the cold. My mother also cautioned us to wear rubbers, but her concern was for our shoes. They cost money. To this day, I am conditioned to care for my shoes, but one hang-up I don't have is about catching colds. Since I don't believe in getting wet brings on a cold, I can get wet and not get a cold. I do know that extreme exposure could affect my health, but it would have to be pretty extreme before my body would succumb. I also firmly believe that my low self can reject any germ it wants to. Therefore, I don't fear contact with sick people. If I feel the first symptom of a cold, I start talking to my low self and ask, "What's up, Junior?" I usually get a sensible answer as to why Junior, my low self, accepts the prospect of being sick. Then I remove the cause of Junior's desire to be sick, and Junior promptly rids our body of the germs. We do not know our own selves very well. We ought to know them better. In order to know them, we must get them to communicate their thoughts, feelings, attitudes, opinions, and beliefs to us. When we get to know them, we can dissolve unwanted conditioning and to start reconditioning. We can begin to assume the role of authority, even our own selves, and take the responsibility for monitoring all information being fed into our low selves. Does it seem like a gigantic program to embark on a path of self-discovery and self-removal is a monumentous undertaking? But I assure you, it is fun all the way, an exciting adventure. One of the characteristics revealed about the Unihippii through the study of the Hawaiian language is its innate tendency to worship gods. This strong trait has a tremendous influence on the course of our lives. As stated before, in infancy, the parents are the gods that are worshipped with the adoration and adoration. During adolescence, this worship of the gods becomes hero worship, and each individual focuses on some social figure for adoration. This shift from parents to others during adolescence occurs more strongly in individuals who lack self-confidence. When we worship, next page, God, we achieve identification with one who is stronger, better, freer, and more powerful. An article in the February 1981 issue of Discovery titled "The Lenin Syndrome" discussed the shift that normal people make from worshiping their parents to those worshiping by other adolescents, to those worshipped by other adolescents. So they start out worshiping their parents, and then they go to school and hang out with other children, and they start worshiping the same idols that their friends worship. This is called hero worship. The transition in adolescence is from physical gods, the parents, to social gods. The new gods have the power to express the things we cannot through inability or taboo. The new gods have the power to express the things we cannot through inability or taboo. So these new gods are probably doing things that their parents previously had said to not do. Rudolph Valentino was worshipped by women whose sexual eroticism was repressed. Elvis Presley, as rebellion against sexual morals, mirrored the wishes of many youths, and Lenin against the status quo, or the mindlessness of everyday life and conformity. Currently, our gods are peaceful individuals and contrast the exploitive, materialistic, aggressive gods of the past. Deep inside, we all believe all gods are immortal. Therefore, the grief is most intense at the death of a social idol. This gives rise to the puzzling phenomenon seen at the death of Elvis Presley, Valentino, and Lenin. With HUNA, this religion, and the underworld, author James Hillman, my eyes jumped to the next paragraph after I read from the first paragraph. With HUNA, we begin to restore a sense of worth and self-esteem to our inner self. We begin to get that self to look at the high self for an outlet for its worship. We encourage our low self to be a channel for love and intelligence from the high self to Yohane, your conscious self. We begin to eliminate adoration. So through hula, you get your low self to start hero worshiping you, your conscious self. But I guess it's kind of a little bit of work. You have to communicate with your low self and treat it with respect and as like a parent. And the child will probably react in turn. Just thinking out loud while I read this stuff. And there is some more interesting information in here that has to deal with the occult and mind control and stuff like that. In The Dream of the Underworld, author James Hillman describes 3 realms of being: the upper world, the underground, and the underworld. They correspond to the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. He puts our high self into the underworld, which corresponds to heaven, and the realm where souls live eternally. Into the underground, the realm of nature, he places our subconscious self, Unihippii. In the upper world, where he finds Yuhane, he finds the world of our culture and society, where heroes exist. Well, it sounds kind of normal to me, except the high self, the higher consciousness, to me, doesn't belong in the underworld. It belongs up in the heavens, which is differentiated in the Bible from the underworld. So why he takes the higher self and throws it into the way under the world, and then in underground is the unconscious self, Unihippii, and the self, high self, the conscious self, he puts in nature, like sitting in this chair behind the tree behind me and all that. So when you read this stuff, you get to kind of think about it, things you don't normally think about. He speaks of Hercules, the classic hero, as being the same as the ego, a part of every Yuhane. So conscious people like me watching the TV programming, Hercules or Superman or other heroes, John Wayne. In all the Greek myths, it is notable that the hero cannot conquer the underworld. The hero is never able to enter it. And like Gilgamesh, he was trying to get into the heaven world, where the gods are, but he couldn't get there. This includes Hercules. These classifications enable us to see misplaced hero worship can be. It becomes a barrier to knowing one's own high self, and always ends in tragedy, with grief at the actual death of the hero god. Our high self is immortal. So this spiritual essence that I believe we have, our soul, spirit, is immortal. Eternally alive in the underworld. But he puts it, the Hawaiian HUNA religion, he puts this spiritual, immortal self in the underworld. I think it's an odd thing. That's part of us can communicate with, and a close relationship can be formed while we are mortal. To the Hawaiian, the highest divinity was each person's high self. So this Kahuna religion, where their highest spiritual self came from the underworld. So is that different from Christianity? When you die, if you believe in Jesus, you go to the heaven world, which is differentiated from the underworld. As above, so below. They claimed anything higher could not be understood and therefore was useless to us. Okay, so the Kahuna, HUNA religion, Hawaiian, they claimed anything higher could not be understood and therefore was useless to us. So they didn't try to understand anything other than the spirit going in the underworld, not underground where the subconscious is. Our own high self has divine aspects that can be communicated to us, emulated by us, integrated into us through the openness of our own inner self, flowing through the subconscious. The superconscious can make itself known. Yuhane, your conscious self, has no direct connection with the high self, just as the ego hero can never enter into the high self's underworld. Ego cannot enter the realm of consciousness where the high self dwells. An illustration of the route the middle self must take to the high self is found, and get this, I was surprised to read this, in the tarot cards, the Lover. So he's making a connection to get into this higher self which is in the underworld, and he's connecting it to the tarot cards, the occult, of the lovers. There are 3 symbols of selves on this card. The male symbolizes Yuhane, your conscious self. He is looking for the female figure, Unihipili, the subconscious self. She is looking up into the symbol to the high self, a face with wings extending outward on both sides. So the subconscious self would be the female aspect and is depicted as a face with wings on both sides of the head, looking to get into the high self, which apparently is in the underworld. In order for the HUNA student to use this precept, it is necessary to be objective to the low self and in full communication with it. When we fully know our low selves, we can begin the process of using Unihipili as a channel to the high self. So the first things first, we pursue knowledge of our inner self and get that relationship to Yuhane integrated and united. Unihipili performs an automatic behavior, all learned habits, skills, and rituals. We learn through the Hawaiian language that it is called a ritualistic self. Each habit is a ritual. So is each skill performed because they are based on a pattern of sequential steps taken to reach a target or goal? Unihipili is a creature of habit, your subconscious, meaning it likes to perform the same sequences that has been established over and over again. Understanding how rituals, habits, skills are learned and performed by your inner self will be a tremendous help in your retaining and the developing new ideas, new rituals, and new skills. A ritual is a series of actions, always performed in the same order and in the same way to produce the same desired results. Parents help infants develop rituals by following ritualistic patterns themselves. Parents use rituals to get the infant to sleep, quiet him down, and get him to do what they want. A typical good night ritual for a small child starts with undressing in a certain way, washing up in a certain sequence, getting the favorite toy or blanket, or climbing into bed. Often the ritual does not end there. A drink of water, a bedtime story, or some other form of attention from the parent is needed before the ritual is complete and the child can sleep. The kahuna, that would be the shamas, the kahuna priest, had made frequent use of the ritual, for they well understood its function and effectiveness. The science of psychology has probed the way people use ritual and has found that we all tend to develop rituals in our everyday life. Apparently, we are ritualistic beings who find comfort in established routines and patterns. Even as infants, we start forming rituals. Many of them become ingrained habits that may persist long after we have forgotten the reason for them. The low self develops rituals. It groups together similar ideas and sequences of ideas in order to perform its function. For instance, to drive a car, we must perform a certain ritual, a routine pattern of actions, without omitting any sequence. This is an innate function of the low self that follows a lawful universal pattern. Like all universal laws, this pattern is neutral but functional. It can be used properly or it can be abused. Let's examine how we use the innate ritualistic character of our low self and see if we can use it in other ways to make life more effective. We often fulfill our needs for security, power, and success by developing rituals that bring those things. Once those things are fully satisfied, other needs may develop, but we may be unable to stop following the old ritual. which is no longer satisfying. At times, we may find that a promise of satisfaction as a result of a certain behavior is never fulfilled. But we go on behaving that way out of habit, remaining hungry and unsatisfied. How innovative is your behavior? How spontaneous are you? How original is your approach to new events? Perhaps you're so immersed in ritual that you're absolutely predictable. Can you think of a friend who behaves in such patterns that you can predict his behavior with certainty under most circumstances? Does certainty make you feel secure? What kind of people do you like to associate with? These are the kinds of questions that arise for the HUNA student. Let them come into your mind. We have many social rituals that help society function smoothly. So we have many social rituals that help society function smoothly. And you have a low self that'll probably throw a tantrum if your society is not running smoothly. Social rituals allow interpersonal interactions without friction. But it is interesting to look at them from a personal point of view and consider whether you hide behind social rituals in order to protect your real self. If so, why? What threatens you? These can be very important questions for your personal growth. And think about that. The powers that be control the education system. And of course the media, TV, news, entertainment, radio, songs. We all know there's some strange lyrics and slogans. Obama running for president talked about change, and everybody was frustrated, wanted change. And then with the 8 years of Obama, people thought some of the things he did was bizarre. And Trump comes along and says, "Make America great again," and everybody wanted to see us with a better face. So these politicians and leaders and controllers of our reality program our lower selves and then offer solution to our lower selves, and our conscious selves acts a little confused and befuddled, wondering, WTH, what the heck is going on? So I try to read this stuff and add it together with what I know and what's going on. Many social rituals inhibit honest expression of feelings and limit our ability to really know one another. Every society has social taboos which are perpetrated by those who do not want the boat rocked. Let us examine some of society's rituals and taboos about sex, money, security, and spiritual growth. Not to mention our church's rituals, many of which have become empty and meaningless. So you can see when you're reading, you have to use your discernment and where this author is coming from at this point. He's using this hula philosophy, ritual, ancient religion for his own personal society changes. Saying right here, not to mention our church's rituals, many of which have become empty and meaningless. And I keep saying in my videos, how many people really believe that now? Christianity was just created to control people. It's no longer needed. It's outdated. We need progressiveness and liberalism and change. But the powers that be know that. And this author here knows not what he does, because the intentional people, or maybe he does, the intentional people trying to destroy Christianity and the Islamic peoples, the Arab peoples, and bring us a global world order, in my opinion, is going to be a very terrible thing for the world. Even some of the clergy seem to be unaware of their purpose. According to the ancient Hawaiians, in the mind of the low self, ideas are like a bunch of grapes that jostle each other into activity. This is the basis of word association test. Once the low self learns a pattern of activity or routine, each step of the sequence triggers the next. Life functions smoothly. Teaching a routine to the low self is a way of setting a pattern we can depend on. We know the low self will not let us down, by forgetting one of the steps. Moving on. Once the low self has learned a ritual, it is greatly disturbed if the sequence is altered in any way and not completed. Let us examine our rituals and see if they are doing what they are designed to do. If they are not, we can devise a new ritual and teach it to the low self through repetition. Since the low self clings to like a vine to everything it has learned, it may not be easy to change. And it will be even more difficult if the ritual is fulfilling some unconscious need. Creating a ritual or teaching it to yourself is a method of teaching yourself what goals you want to achieve. To impress some idea on the low self, create a ritual and perform it every day until the low self has learned it and will do it automatically. So if you want to learn how to change your behavior or do something different, intentionally do it for a few days, and your whole subconscious will pick it up and it'll do it itself after a while. Creating a ritual and teaching it to your low self is a method of teaching yourself what goals you want to achieve. I just had a visitor. I get a little distracted. To impress some idea on the low self, create a ritual and perform it every day until the low self has learned it and will do it automatically. But before designing new rituals, why not redesign some old ones to make them more efficient? Here is a list of situations usually governed by rituals. Add your own suggestions and then perform the exercise so you can review your own rituals and change those that are impeding your successful pursuit of happiness. All right, some of the goals might be meeting new friends, greeting old friends, getting a disagreeable job done, earning your living, getting to sleep, getting started in the morning. So he's teaching something here, but like I said, there are some other things here that get a little bit interesting, coinciding with some of the stuff I've been talking about. Sit quietly and allow your mind to project a movie of one of your rituals. Notice whether it produces satisfaction and exactly what the satisfaction is. Probe your feelings regarding this ritual. Then image doing things differently. So think about how you get up in the morning and make your coffee and do this. And if you want to change things, then sit down and visually memorize or go through it in your mind what you want to do the next morning, maybe what you want to add or what you want to avoid. Probe your feelings regarding this ritual and then image doing things differently. Change the pattern and observe it. Think about what you would like to gain by changing the ritual. When you have designed a new ritual and behavior, rehearse it in your mind until your low self has become proficient. There's a lot of bugs here in this heat in North Carolina in the mountains. Then just allow it to happen naturally in your life. A ritual that is performed daily will become more powerful if it is done with intense desire and feeling. A prefrontatory performance has no energy in it. So just a not serious or just lackadaisical performance has no power at all. So your desire to achieve results with your ritual must be a major part of the ritual itself. Put a lot of feeling into it. Join with your low self in performing the ritual until you can get it to do it skillfully, and you will begin to see results. The low self's belief in the effectiveness of a ritual is essential to success. We use the word half-hearted to denote an action in which the low self is only partly involved. It is well known that half-hearted actions don't have much force. Explain literally what it is you want to accomplish. Arouse enthusiasm with your low self for the goal you envision. Check your low self's feelings about the ritual and revise it if necessary until you get wholehearted support. Since most skills are performed ritually, that is, in a certain sequential pattern that brings success, we can perfect our skills by using the same method. A friend who plays the piano was unable to master a particular fingering technique. Physical practice wasn't achieving his aim of smooth performance, so he sat down and reviewed in his mind each step. In the process, he wanted to learn. In his imagination, he slowly did each step in sequence, repeating and repeating until he could do it in his mind with the speed he wanted to be able to play the piano. It worked. When he tried the technique at the piano, his fingers performed nimbly, perfectly. So playing things out in your mind, if you can't play a guitar or whatever you want to do a speech, make videos like this, if you just start practicing and doing it like I did, it may get smoother and eventually get better. In an experiment, 20 men were taught to play golf. 10 practiced on the links for a week, and 10 practiced in their minds. The result was that all developed approximately the same degree of success. I practice many times in my mind and have found it saves me much time and effort. And I think that might work like playing the piano or the guitar. If you watch videos, teachers showing you how to play the guitar or piano or whatever you want to do, painting. If you watch videos and videos and videos, it says here it's similar to actually practicing, and you'll pick up and develop skills. And here's part of the information I found a little bit astonishing why I'm going through all of this work. You can use ritual if you desire to make astral journeys or trips out of your body. First, create in your imagination a moving image of a trip out of your body, around the room and back in again. List the steps. My ritual went like this. First, an image of me rising out of my head and dropping gently to the floor. Next, I go to the bookcase, and then to the lamp, and then to the desk, and then to the telephone. Last, an image of me rising up in the air and descending gently into my body through my head. Oh my, out-of-body experiences, remote viewing, the government's into that, training remote viewers to leave their bodies. So when I found that in this book, I was a little astonished. I sat and practiced this in my mind until the routine was memorized. I got so that I could do it in my imagination clearly and quickly without forgetting any of the steps. I had established it as a pleasant ritual by doing it every evening before I retired. Then I chose a night that seemed propitious for a real out-of-body experience and got ready for bed before performing the ritual. So in his mind, he was just envisioning his soul leaving his body, floating in the air, dropping to the floor, walking around, and then jumping back into his body. And he did that again and again and again. And then one night, he'd laid down and tried to do the real thing instead of in his mind. And apparently, he said it worked. I sat down and imagined myself floating up and out of my body, landing on the floor, then going first to the bookcase, then to the lamp. But here I stopped, opened my eyes, went to bed without finishing the ritual. The natural, realistic low self was startled, still moving irresistibly along the lines of established ritual. It pushed me to continue to the end. In order to do this, I got out of my bed and proceeded along the route I had designed finishing the ritual. When facing a new situation, I have found that it helps greatly to deliberately rehearse in my mind how to deal with it successfully. programming my low self for the type of behavior I want. This has replaced the habit I used to have of imagining all the horrible things I feared would occur. Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Remember that speech? We think if we accustom ourselves to the worst, there will be no shock when it happens. Shocks, of course, threaten our survival. But by trying to avoid them, we may be programming our lives for the worst than for the best. Using our new knowledge of low self, we can begin to develop patterns of behavior that have built-in expectations of success. Thus, we can create our own reality in a new design to greater achievement. And that's an odd perspective. People living in fear with all the fear-mongering, global warming, terrorism, economic collapse. And a lot of people live in fear, and some people do nothing about it. And if something bad happens, which eventually, likely something will happen. If you just look at the sequences of all the wars we've been in and all the changes that are going on right now, it is accelerating. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop or reverse. Well, continuing on. This is my third day, May 31st, trying to get this video finished. Started on Wednesday. I got about 30 minutes to go. So let me continue with this book. And interestingly enough, I had some time to think about some of the things I was reading in this book, so it just gives me a few more comments to make. But back to the book, page 56. The low self is the guardian of our physical well-being and survival. So apparently we do have a mechanism, subconscious, that takes care of our health and our well-being. It will send hunger pangs when it needs food, show its preferences for the food it needs. It will attract our attention to anything endangering our existence and holds the power to keep us well, healthy, and can create a climate for illness and injury. So our low self can actually cause us to get sick if it's programmed that way. What is often considered a distraction by HUNA is an attraction for the HUNA, the subconscious low self. The low self will attempt to let HUNA, the conscious self, know why it is attracted to something other than what HUNA is paying attention to. And I do know, and everybody knows this, that the advertising media uses pictures of women for selling things, because they know that we have these mechanisms in our conscious self or subconscious self to be attracted to, and you can also call it distracted, because it's something you didn't intentionally go look for. But there it goes, and you're going like this or like this, and vice versa. Women have attractions for certain men. So they use these things because they know how our conscious self works and our subconscious self works. And I think it's important for people to take self-responsibility and be aware of this unintentional control over ourselves with this stuff. Back to the book. Unless we have a strong will to live in the physical body, the HUNA, low self, subconscious, will not make an all-out effort to keep it strong and healthy. So unless you have a strong desire to live and thrive and do things, then your subconscious will work harder to keep you healthy and able to do things. But if you get depressed, and lose your energy or your push to do things in life, then apparently your subconscious could wind up doing the same thing, dragging you down. So it does. The mind can affect the body. If the mind, the conscious self, can affect the subconscious self. Just a FYI there. What is often considered a distraction by the HUNA is an attraction to the Unihippii. Okay, back to the book. Unless our feelings find expression in the outer world, they will be destructive in the frustration of their power to express themselves. Under our thinking is the positive and ambitious. Unless our thinking is positive and ambitious, the low self will not furnish the energy necessary to fulfill our goals. The Unihippii directly reflects our will to live and be and to actualize our potential, or not even try. The inner self has power over the physical body, but we have powers we can exert on our low self. We can command it to give us the vitality to accomplish tasks. So apparently we can command our self-conscience. And I do know that people can't remember things from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago. But you go see a hypnotist, and you can recall almost anything. And people go see a hypnotist because their subconscious, through habit, smoke cigarettes or drink too much or whatever, get aggressive, all kinds of things, afraid of heights. But you can go see a hypnotist, and he can resolve where you got that programming and clear it. That's what they call it. And again, that's some of the same material in other research like Dianetics. FYI, so I used to smoke cigarettes when I was younger, and it was the most frustrating thing in the world to stop. And I did go see a hypnotist, and I did stop. We can command it to heal us immediately. So there's a thought, cancer or other illnesses. You just have to wonder how your low self could be programmed to allow that to happen. And I think probably mentally we can reverse things like that when they're happening. And a good example, of course, is in the New Testament, Jesus healing sick people, whether it was they were possessed by unclean spirits or had some evil, negative programming in their bodies, if they knew how to do that. And there have been healers all over the world. So maybe they knew something about this and how to change the control mechanisms in our bodies. Just like when I read these books, I think a little bit and the different possibilities, which people should do. Speaking of that, I was seeing something in the news yesterday. But apparently in Missouri, the state and all the school systems and the hospitals were having an exercise for an outbreak of Ebola. It was in the newspapers, like 46 million results when I checked the computer a few minutes ago. And you got to know that, that kind of thing can affect the conscious self, and the subconscious self is aware of this. So it can be a little traumatizing. But what's interesting, one YouTuber said that a plane took off from Missouri and flew all the way down to South Florida, turned out into the ocean, and 300 miles out went into the sea when the two F-18 jets were pursuing it. This was just yesterday, the day before. And he's theorizing that this plane coming from the state where they were having the Ebola outbreak, that they could just be spraying Ebola into the air and nobody would know it, how it happened. And I've been talking about that with the chemtrailing, dumping chemicals in the sky. And you gotta know, if you wake up and you see the dumping of chemicals and you believe what you're seeing, it does require or cause your subconscious and your conscious mind some frustration, conflict, and taking actions in your life, changing things you would normally do. Because your subconscious is aware of it if you're aware of it. If you're looking up and you're saying, oh my, then your subconscious is going, oh my, and it's going to take action to, I guess, protect your survival, different things. So these things that the powers that be are doing in the media, terrorism, economic threats, global warming, 5G, microwave transmissions, and so much more, do affect us and do cause us to change our routines and our activities. And a lot of people have moved away from the cities and gone out into the country and become survivalist and all this. So why do you think all that happens? And are the controllers of our planet playing with us and causing these things to come into our awareness so that we will take actions, and the action we take is probably a predictable action? Odd things to think about when you're reading about how the body works by the Hawaiian HUNA, ancient religion. So we can command our low self to heal us immediately, not by being arrogant, but by playing the role of the wise parent. For within each human body there is a child who wants to live a good physical life, but still be protected and guided by its inner parent. When our feelings and thoughts are in unison and in agreement, the unihippii, the low self, the subconscious self, has no choice but to obey. Like all wise parents, we sometimes find we must be firm in our resolve and steadfast in our intention to get our inner child to do exactly what we want it to do and know it can do it. HUNA teaches us that the unihippii has the power to heal the body, and we can use that knowledge to begin to train the unihippii to obey our commands and to heal the body when all is well between the Yuhane and the unihippii, the conscious self and the subconscious self. And let's not forget the high self. What do you call it? The Godhead, God, believing in Jesus, the spiritual world. Or people who are joining the satanic Lucifer forces, the high self, like in this book that they say that is in the underworld. So I guess the high self can be in the thinking about being in heaven, or can wind up choosing to go to Hades. And just thinking again in my brain, it's funny on those gay pride parades, that one guy with the poster who says, "I bet hell is fabulous." And the people who get all these weird tattoos of daggers and dragons and other symbols of horror in their bodies, you have to wonder what their subconscious self is telling them and how they've been programmed to do that. Because I'm seeing new, at this point in the game, as long as these tattoo parlors have been around, they're opening up more and more every day. So that's telling me that the controlling powers that are programming we the people that to the dark side is ever increasing. So the good side is losing in numbers. And I do know, I remember talking about this in many videos, but in 2007 and 2008, when I purchased 55 acres of land in Maine, where I grew up, I wanted to leave the big city, Orlando, because I became aware of the chemtrailing, sky spraying, and a lot of other nefarious things after 9/11, etc. Lose my train of thought there. But I went up to Maine, and I remember the radio at 2 o'clock in the morning. The announcer would say, they're trying to pass legislation for gay marriage. 60% of the people are opposed to it, and 6% are for it. And I remember the announcer on the radio saying, it'll never get passed. The American people will never support it. And then the media with the billboards and all this other stuff, and TV programming and movies, Brokeback Mountain, everything else, and education and all that, and they keep throwing it at us and throwing at us, even on that TV show Ellen, bringing on a little boy or a girl talking about the gay parents. So they kept feeding our low self, and they were programming us. And a year later, it was a little more in favor of gay marriage. And they kept programming us some more and programming us some more. And the next year was a little more. So from 2008 to something like 2011, and not too long ago, the Supreme Court banned states from banning gay marriage. They were programming we people. And the same thing, they're doing that with the Christian religion and all these other things. So the whole mechanism of these evil forces in the world right now that are causing the tattoo parlors to become more popular and more people going that way, even slogans, it's cool to be weird or stuff like that, it is increasing. And it is intentional. And I've been reading some other books, and I'm going to show that. There is an effort to destroy the religious consciousness of Christianity and other religions. I'm open-minded. I understand that all people all over the planet are being attacked. And they are being persuaded, tricked, deceived into joining the New Age dark side beliefs that something like they try to teach that ye are gods. Forget God, you're a god. And all that stuff. So when you talk to people, you can't, if they've been programmed this way, it's a losing battle to try to convince them to that they've been programmed. It's just, you can't do it. They get angry. They actually will get violent if you try to force somebody to look up and see the sky sprang, or to actually say that the Iranian people are not evil, we should not be attacking them. And if they support Donald Trump and what's going on right now with the warmongers, they'll get vicious and angry with you if they've been programmed that way. So it's interesting to read a book like this and see how the programmed lower self interacts with the conscious self, and how the conscious self and the lower self interact with each other. So our conscious self sees these news releases like the Ebola in Missouri and other things, and then all of a sudden the low self sees that you're serious about it and you believe it, so it believes it, and it takes action. Interesting. Balance in all things is one built-in goal of the low self. This is reflected in the physical body, which has everything needed to maintain complete balance. Every chemical produced in the brain is accompanied by another which inhibits production. Each chemical is the mirror reflection of another. The word homeostasis was coined as a label for the biological fact, that biological fact. The mind of HUNA, your low self subconscious, contains the ability to compute mathematically all that is. Space is measured as well as time. Distances far and near, time past and present, are clearly distinguished by the low self. It can deal with the minute qualities of physical energies, as well as large ones and minute qualities of hormones, chemicals, and other substances produced by the body. It measures doorways and ducts automatically, lest you strike your head on the door. It moves your body into a car without hitting anything, and runs upstairs, automatically stopping when there is no more stairs. Its nature is to run the physical body to full health and at top functioning power. HUNA cannot speak words, it cannot move independently, but it can send you urges, hunger pains, emotions, memories, and messages from any survival structure belief system. It uses the physical body as a storage for energy, as well as a factory for the production of physical energy. It stores memory patterns in muscles and nerves so that the automatic functioning will be intelligent. HUNA, your subconscious, under orders from HUNA, your conscience, sends energy to the voluntary muscles for instant action. The energy contains the information about which action is desired. As you consider this lightning-fast process, it makes you feel wonder and awe at the orderly laws that govern the physical existence. Most of our functions are involuntary, that is, performed by your low self. It breathes for you, digests your food, re-energizes you when your body tires, yawns to get more oxygen into the system. It also does much more. Think about some of the things you have always taken for granted. Isn't it wonderful? So you do have to be amazed if you actually think about the function of the human body, the conscious self, the subconscious self, and the high self, your spiritual self. And again, it seems to me, and I've learned a long time ago when I first started my research on how to use a pendulum to find water, or divining rods from a tree, like taking a branch and walking around and thinking about water. And then when you walk over an underground stream, the divining rod will bend, literally. So I think it's a function of your subconscious self, again, having a greater awareness of the reality around us, knowing what you want. So apparently your subconscious self is some kind of self that doesn't see like I see with these eyes. It sees everything in a higher dimensional level, including the water under the ground, causing your muscles to bend when you get over it, but your conscious self doesn't do it. Makes you wonder. Most of our functions are involuntary. That is, performed by your low self. It breathes for you, digests your food, energizes. I said all that. And also the train of thought. Sometimes I lose it, my train of thought. But I do know that when I take a pendulum and I put it over a picture of a person, let's say a president, and the pendulum, I can just hold it, and I can ask the pendulum to show me a yes, and it'll turn clockwise, and I'll say thank you. If you program your pendulum, you can get any book on dowsing and learn how to do this, and you can say show me a no, and it'll go counterclockwise. Clear enough? So people can be inherently their low self and then their high self. The conscious self and the subconscious self can be negative or positive, have a propensity, a greater desire to do good for others, to be service to others. Some people want to be service to self, and could give not a care for others. So some people are positive and some people are negative. You could call it, some people, by our explanation, are good and some people are evil. Believe it or not, and you could take a pendulum over a photo of a person and you can say, show me the person's nature. Is it positive? Because remember, it's how you're forming your belief system. Or is it negative? And you got a picture of somebody, like a president, and you hold the pendulum over it, and all of a sudden it goes counterclockwise. So the person has a propensity to be self-serving and cooperating with evil people, bring wars. And then, of course, somebody else, you put the pendulum over Jesus, for example, and it starts gyrating really strong to the right. And then you can also take the same person, the president you were looking at, and say, what about the subconscious self of this person? Is it positive or negative? And it goes counterclockwise. So apparently I did that over a vice president. I'm not going to name names, but during 2001. And it was negative on the conscious self and negative on the subconscious self. And so I didn't believe this stuff. And then I tried it on some other pictures. And a president during those periods of time, when I checked the lower self, the pendulum didn't go negative and didn't go positive. It did a figure 8. And it took me a long time to figure it out. But it meant that the person was possessed. Probably the person had been practicing in witchcraft rituals or Illuminati rituals, sacrificing people, sexual rituals. And apparently when people do this, they become possessed with this evil entity spirit. So in their bodies, or in control of their bodies, is not only their normal subconscious self, which might have been replaced, but some other entity. And so every time I do the pendulum on different presidents and people and stuff like that, and myself and other people I know, just something I keep confidential. I don't want to invade on anybody's privacy. But when it does the figure 8 on the lower self, it means they're possessed. Quite bizarre. Just, again, because I've done so much research, especially into psychic research and dowsing, and then I read stuff like this, I get a greater understanding of how the whole thing works, reality, which is what I'm after. And this is not the only book I'm going to do on these topics of indigenous native peoples, like the Hawaiian kahunas. I'm working more on the phone. That's what you get with a low production, low cost program. You have to work while you're making videos and answer the phone. This is the whole show, me. Usually all my videos are first run. But as I was saying, before I was interrupted by the phone, I've decided to take a strong look at the Hawaiian kahunas, and another look at Shambhala and the Egyptian culture and religions, and continue looking at the Jewish Kabbalistic cultures and things going on. I've been learning some interesting things about that, and even the Native Americans and Hyperborea, and more about Christianity and the Islamic peoples and the Buddhists and the Hindus. I have books on all these. So I want to get this kind of information from all these different cultures and kind of mix it up in my brain and take my time and see where I can find the common denominators. But as we've seen with this book, it says here about how to leave your body in astral travel, and you see some similarities with the Kabbalah, mystics, witchcraft, sorcery, alchemy, and a lot of that information in Morals and Dogma, Freemason teaching books, and Rosicrucians, and even the Church of Satan, and all these other occult organizations. So it is an interesting pursuit, and I don't think it's anything you can hurry. You just have to kind of read along and think and ponder and get comments from the viewers and watch other videos. And, you hear about serpent beings all over the planet, and David Icke and reptilians, and Corey Good, David Wilcock on blue avians and the Galactic Federation, and some kind of transition into another dimensional shift, changing the law of physics, ascension, whatever. It's a very bizarre conversation. Meanwhile, they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple so they can start sacrificing people. For what? To have some kind of communication with some kind of deity from the sky. Some kind of lightning bolt to come down and consume the burnt offering. Just like when the one pope stepped down not too long ago, and they put Pope Francis in the pope's chair. That's never happened before. Usually a pope has to die. But lightning struck the cathedral that day. And so much more mysterious activity going on in our world. So I plug away and try to understand some of it and discuss it in my videos. And sometimes you get some interesting surprises, like what I'm about to read next in this book. Unihippie's nature is to function as simple and efficiently as possible. It will always perform actions in the easiest, more effortless way if given the opportunity. Taking that statement on faith, the HUNA student begins a new approach towards awareness of physical being. Health is the word to describe the physical body that is run well, without interference from belief systems, negative thinking, or destructive efforts from the environment. And the dumping of chemicals in the sky certainly seems to be a destructive element in our environment, and the increased microwave transmitters and wireless systems everywhere. You don't need to be a scientist to see how those microwaves can be detrimental to our health. If you have any problems understanding that, just stick a hot dog in the microwave oven and turn it on, and just think of microwaves cooking you like that. And your low self would probably be aware of the damage happening to you, and your conscious self would only think that you're irritable for a natural reason. Back to the book. Many of our muscles are in constant tension, trying to go and stop at the same time. In the past, they were instructed to go into action and immediately inhibited from performing that action, a constant tremor, so tiny it was usually below our awareness. If you touch one of those muscles, tremorless or tense, it feels rigid and stiff. A relaxed muscle is soft and pliable. So apparently, if you're under constant tension, your low subconscious self, can take physical action on your body. And here's where I got an interesting paragraph next. William Reich. You know who William Reich is? R-E-I-C-H, the one who was using cloudbusters, collecting some kind of energy called orgone, and then the government tried to shut him down, put him in prison, and he died. I've got some books on William Reich, and I've been reading it, a couple of them, and that'll be one of the book reviews I do, discussing his activities. Anyways, his therapy was to knead the stiff muscles, releasing the energy caged within. Almost simultaneously, his client would re-experience mentally the events that created the original pain that was often the root cause. By raising the awareness, we can deal with these past events and release them from our low self. So I'll end this here, probably look at this book and make another video. I do have a couple pictures to look at before I stop this program. Okay, so I went and looked up the pictures on the HUNA religion in Hawaii, and you can go on Yahoo image site and look them up. But it says here, the function of the conscious mind keep replaying the memories and continue the blaming and thinking processes. Number 2, initiates the Ho'oponopono process, repentance and forgiveness, to neutralize the designated memories. Eventually, neutralized energies are then released into storage, leaving the void. So it's some kind of process. The transmuting energy first neutralizes designated memories. So sometimes when you get particular problems, it's because you've gone through some kind of trauma. And you can find these pictures on Yahoo image site. Got some more here, so you can get an idea of so the divine intelligence, the heaven world, the superconscious is a maybe your spiritual self, and then the conscious self, me talking right here, and of course my subconscious self. These pictures you can find on Yahoo image site. So I like to look up the pictures. So the inner expression, the amuka, totally trustworthy. The higher self is totally trustworthy, unless you're dealing with the satanic low self, then you're going to be deceived. And the Yuhane is the ghost or the spirit. The Unihippii, the little creature. So when I was reading this material, I thought I'd go get the pictures. And of course, if you do have particular small problems, fear of heights, or you totally freak out if you see a snake or something, it might have been something that happened when you were young, or you can't quit smoking and you've been programmed to do it, or drinking. They have something called a cleaning process. Self-identity operates by either inspiration or memory. Usually we operate in the memory state instead of the inspiration state. So if you're a smoker, you keep replaying and replaying and replaying, and you can't stop the program. Principles of HUNA. The world is what you think it is. There are no limits. Energy flows where attention goes. Now is the moment of power. To love is to be happy with. All power comes from within. Effectiveness is the measure of truth. Just some pictures to help me try to understand what I'm talking about. The egg diagram on the human psyche. Higher consciousness, middle consciousness, lower subconsciousness, collective unconscious, you can go on Yahoo image site. Here's a little interesting picture I found on the Yahoo image search. It's just a sentence here. Spirit of a dead person, sometimes believed present. Spirit of a dead person, sometimes believed present in bones or hair of the deceased, and kept lovingly. Unihippii bones were prayed for help, and sometimes sent to destroy an enemy. So apparently with the kahunas, the spiritual connection between somebody's dead bones and that deceased entity, if a kahuna witch doctor in Hawaii had the bones or the hair of the deceased person, because it's connected to the spiritual person now in heaven or Hades, wherever, or maybe in limbo, neither place, whatever they call it. But apparently the kahuna can summon that entity and have it do things for him. And I've gone over that when I talked about the kahunas in Max Long's book reviews I did a long time ago. And you can look up Max Long on my Freemasonry and Satanism series and watch those videos. They were quite interesting about how they were, the kahunas in Hawaii were actually imprisoning, maybe in a cellar or a stump, several deceased spirits. They imprison them and they use them for power and send them out to hurt people, and they possess them. It's called a wasting away disease. And apparently if it happens in Hawaii, I guess they still practice this, like in Haiti and Dominican Republic, they practice voodoo. And voodoo it works a similar way. A lot of people don't understand how witchcraft works, or don't believe that the spiritual beings can be communicated with. But apparently it's even in the UN charter that I went over on a recent video, that deceased people, disincarnated spirits, can be communicated with. And again, I ask, is it a heavenly type being or a being down in the underworld, Hades or hell? Where? I found this other picture. It's kind of cool. Cool, cross, and weird. Not all Hawaiian gods are good. The shark god, Kahulahai, was revered by most fishermen because the deity was believed to appear to those lost at sea and guide them to shore. However, the human better have good intentions when summoning help. A good person will produce a kalahaki. A good person will produce a kalahaki, or a good shark, that will lead the lost boat to land. But a bad person, and I found this to be interesting on this picture, will produce a unihippie, or bad shark that will help capsize the boat and devour the person. And then I'm reading this book about our low selves being a unihippie, and he does talk about the underworld in this book. And it says in this picture that a bad person produces a unihippie who will work to destroy you. Thought that was something, maybe the guy didn't know who's right or wrong, that picture or this book. And the book did mention that the higher self was down in the underworld. And it has an interesting chart here about the high self, subconscious self. If you want to go look it up on the Yahoo image site. The HUNA religion of Hawaii, Yahoo images, and you'll find these pictures. But it says here, the higher self, highest and fullest potential. This is your highest self. Ideal self, superconscious, unconditional love, power to love and be wise, respond from love, limitless growth, power to heal, intuition, eternally in the now, always adaptable, empowers consciousness with awareness. And then the subconscious self, it says here, the physical body, mind, survival mind, instincts, common to all, basically unchangeable, your lower self, survival-oriented, limited to safety, comfort, pleasure, fight or flight, personality or character, unique to individual, hard to change, can be subject to some refinement, character being a combination, will, thinking, and feeling, conditioning, programming, emotional needs of the subconscious self often symbolizes the inner child. Serving higher self is the conscious self, and the ego on the lower self, predominantly survival strategies, and so much more. If you want to go look it up. So as I've always been saying on my videos, we are more than what we think we are. Ala Huda, ancient wisdom heals modern lives. If you can say that better than me, good for you. And here I noticed with the HUNA Hawaiian cult religion, I see this one here, Yosoi, and apparently the chakra system of the New Age materials. That was a connection I made. So it seems like when I do the Peruvians or the Mexican shamans or the other ones, I'm going to continue to find some common denominators, which is what I'm after. And even if you study Christianity, you'll find the occult and spirituality, Jesus healing, rising from the dead, casting out unclean spirits, prophesizing what's going to happen next. So it isn't all so mysterious. If you do a little research and you study the Mayans and the indigenous tribes in Africa and the Asians and the Nordics and Eskimos and people all over the world, there are many common denominators. And apparently one of them is there is a good and there is evil. And everybody gets to have a choice. And that's one. The second one is, this life is a temporary situation. It's not our real selves. So when the fear-mongering, the Ebola, the global warming, the chemtrailing, the 5G, and you see all that stuff taking place, yes, I think we should wake up. Yes, I think we should talk to people. And you see the intentional destruction of Christianity. Yes, we should say no. Yes, we should tell other people. But don't live in fear. We're all leaving this planet anyways. It's not really what happens to you. It's how you react to what happens to you. That's what I've told myself for years. So when bad people treated me horribly bad, I'd never allowed myself to hate them. I actually said I pray for them intentionally, even though they did mean things to me. And even if these evil people bring us World War III and start attacking Iran tomorrow, all we can do is pray and talk to the higher self and have trust in God and know, and again, we're going to wind up there or down there when we leave. All these different indigenous peoples and their religions kind of teach the same thing. You can see the serpent being everywhere and the sun and things like that. A lot of common denominators. Alright, so I stop rambling on. I'll end this video. Thank you for watching. Rick Miracle reporting.